All right, everybody, let's get going now. Thank you so much for joining this webinar. A warm welcome to everybody. I do see that people are still trickling in, but that's fine. We can get started. Uh, I must say today is a very proud moment for us at Benori. This is the launch of our knowledge series. And today, this is the first one that we are doing. And you can expect that over time, over the next few months, you will see many more of such sessions being organized. Today's session and the knowledge series is all about GCCs in India, how globalization of work is happening, and why the GCC industry in India is playing a seminal and a critical role in the globalization of work. What we have done is the next 45 minutes, we have divided that into three sections. The first section, in just a minute or so, I will start with. This is really around how India is dominating the globalization of services, what has been the evolution, why India, what are our strategic strengths as a destination for GCCs, and some of the trends, very strategic trends that we are seeing in the marketplace. So I will cover all of that over 15, 18 minutes. Then I will hand it over to my colleague Madhurima, who is also participating in this webinar. Madhurima will take everybody through, um, what is the GCC ecosystem all about? What are the needs of this ecosystem? And what could be potentially the solutions and the, overall value add that partners like Benori could bring to the table? So Madhurima will go on for about 12 to 14 minutes, and then the last 15 minutes we will just try and answer your questions. In that vein, it'll be good if, as we are going through our presentations, you can keep on posting your questions in the Q&A window, and then we will try and take up some of the more critical ones and try and answer as many of those as possible. And also, finally, before I start, towards the end of the webinar, when you are exiting from there, a pop-up feedback form will appear. Please do fill that out. That will give us interesting insights into how this thing went. Okay, let me again extend a warm welcome to all the other participants who have joined over the last 2, 3 minutes. Uh, as mentioned earlier, I'm going to talk about the first section here, which is, how has India got to this? How has India, become the dominant force in the globalization of services? What all is happening, and what are some of the trends? So, with that, maybe I can start out. So if you really look at it, if you look at the history of humankind on the planet, obviously the initial maybe 5,000 years back, or at least a few thousand years back, the entire global economy started with the globalization of agriculture. So this was, trade routes started with the advent of shipping. Then we moved over time and got into the Renaissance period and the later Renaissance period, when the steam engine was built and that innovation happened. That led to rapid industrialization, manufacturing, and so on. And then, of course, we all know what happened in the 20th century, where massive amounts of globalization of manufacturing happened, and industrial corridors and trade and so on. Around the time of the advent of computers, maybe in the 1960s, definitely in the 70s, was the first time when services started getting globalized. And then, of course, the last 20 years or so, with the emergence of the internet and with AI and cloud and computing power at a scale, and very, very cost effective computing power, And then, of course, with the cost of storage coming down to almost zero, we started seeing the globalization of services in the true spirit, in the true format. And of course, moving on to the next slide. So this is how the GCCs and how in India the whole GCC movement and the revolution sort of has panned out. So if you look at this slide, then in the 80s, we had Texas Instrument, we had British Airways uh, setting up uh, uh, their operations in India. So the whole entire genesis happened. The industry was born throughout the 90s and the 2000, the first decade of 2000. One started seeing low cost delivery, the scaling up, very strategic offshoring started in the first decade of this century. And by about 2010, we were at about 700. Of course, these numbers are difficult to really pinpoint down to the last number, but approximately there were about 700 GCCs by about 2010. The revenues was about $12 billion. There were about 400,000 people working in that industry. And then, of course, GE with Jekis, American Express, Goldman Sachs, Citi, and a bunch of other large corporations from the world, including like McKinsey Knowledge Center and many, many other consulting firms, investment firms, and manufacturing firms started setting up the GCCs in India. From 2010 onwards, and of course, who is to say whether it's 2010 or 2008, but roughly around that time, one started seeing a massive going up the value chain. So by about 2020, not only had the industry gone up the value chain, but massively scaled up. 1,300 GCCs, $33 billion of revenue. And again, the dollar had depreciated significantly from the 90s till the 2015s. And then the industry had about 1.3 billion people, million people. And then, of course, last few years, India has truly emerged as a global leader. There's huge amounts of capability hubs here. Revenues have gone up and so on. And we'll cover some of these aspects as we go on. So if you look at the current landscape in India, um, the first pie here talks about ER&D, which is leading the charge, which is great, because these are very, very high-end processes, research, development, engineering. So the ER&D segment within the GCCs accounts for about 56% of the overall pie. And then, of course, you have 23% with BPM and about 21% with IT. Very, very interestingly, global functions, global leaders have somewhere overnight almost have emerged inside the GCCs. So to our best estimate and some of the research that we have done, 6,500 global roles are present in India. And what is also very interesting and very inspiring to see that almost 20% of these roles are occupied by women leaders. If you look at the geographical origination of these GCCs, then almost two-thirds of them come from US corporations, 29% from Europe, mostly nowadays, Middle East. Some GCCs are starting to appear from there. And of course, the rest is from mainly from APAC. This slide might not be a big surprise to anybody. Of course, Bangalore dominates in terms of GCCs. Delhi NCR is number two, and then the whole host of other locations like Pune, Hyderabad, and so on. Overall, there has been a 60% growth in the GCCs over the last 5 years. And then you have a geographical spread across Ahmedabad, Kolkata, Coimbatore, and so on, also going on. The tier two, tier three cities, and we'll come back to this point again, offer significant cost advantages and access to a growing talent pool. I would just gently remind everybody to please keep on posting your questions in the Q&A window. Now, why is India dominating the GCC industry? And there are several factors here. We have tried to capture the most important ones here. Clearly, an access to a vast, diverse, and a young talent pool, a sustainable cost advantage. And what is important is not only the scalability, but the sustainability of the cost structure in India. And then a hugely massive enabling ecosystem that the country has managed to put together. Now, if you look at talent, again, these numbers are not surprising at all. Um, and, 24% of our population is in this 20 to 35 age bracket. If you look at the STEM fields, 35% of our student population is in science, technology, engineering, and math areas. 51% is now the employability. About even 10 years back, this was at 34%, which means that if 100 graduates are coming out of our colleges and universities, only 34%, as defined by industry in terms of what their requirement was at that time, they were employable. But nowadays, this number has gone up 51%. So there are two impacts over the last 10 years. One, the sheer capacity of our education system has gone up. So the number of graduates coming out of our colleges has gone up dramatically. And then a higher percentage of these are very attractive for industry. If you look at the right-hand side, 4.1 million, um, enrolled students in engineering fields. Very, very interestingly, and maybe this is an underreported number of 1.25 million, but the installed base of the talent pool regarding AI is growing very rapidly, and we are already at 1.25 million, and maybe it's even closer to 2 million from some of our estimates. And to my earlier point, 60% um, of the graduates are coming from tier two, tier three cities, and they're across the board in engineering, arts, and sciences, and so on. Okay, with that, let's move to the next slide. Now, the sustainable cost advantage is a very, very important point. If we look at it in a very dispassionate way, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's high quality office spaces, whether it's the flexibility that co-working workspaces offer, the sheer magnitude of the new capacity which is coming in. A lot of this capacity is coming in terms of real estate is coming in tier two, tier three cities, Indore or Banaras or Jaipur or even places like Coimbatore. They're all exploding with great infrastructure and very cost-effective infrastructure. But the real driver of this sustainable strategic cost advantage that India has to do with our talent pool. The sheer number, the sheer capability, the sheer talent, and the cost structure that still exists. And somebody has posted a question around how wage inflation has happened over time. We'll come to that question later on. But fortunately, what has also improved dramatically is productivity levels. So labor productivity in the early days of the outsourcing industry was always a question mark. And earlier on in our careers, we used to define this thing called lambda. Lambda used to be productivity of one person in India divided by productivity of a similar rolled person in the West. And that lambda used to always be 60%, 65%, 70% at best. But what we have seen over the years is that our teams here in India, whether in GCCs or third-party providers of these services, they're absolutely world-class now. So the lambda is very quickly approaching one, which also means that For a process earlier, if you needed 1.5 FTEs, because the productivity was 60%, 65%, now maybe you can get away with 1.1. Okay, next slide. And of course, the enabling ecosystem that we have, whether it's the government policies, the national IT policy, the tax incentives, and several states have actually, whether it's Karnataka or Uttar Pradesh and other examples also, um, they have a very progressive and very forward-looking, policies around incentivizing more GCCs to come up. And of course, the startup ecosystem, the niche talent that we have, academia, universities, incubators, associations, they're all playing a very important role. And of course, we all know geopolitically and otherwise, India is emerging as a very stable environment, a very large economy, rapidly growing economy with a huge amount of say in the global geopolitics, as the case might be. I will just spend maybe three minutes more, um, 3 minutes more on some of the trends that we are seeing. We essentially seeing there's some other trends as well, but these were the four that we thought might be of interest today. First is, of course, how GCCs are leveraging technology. Second, very interesting trend, which I just learned about over the last 1 week or 2 weeks as we were doing the research for this webinar. Um, Emergence of nano GCCs. So in the earlier days, one used to say there needs to be at least 400, 500 people to make it economically viable in a GCC. Nowadays, that scale has gone down. Third, ER&D that continues to scale massively, and of course, the GCCs are going up the value chain. Just quickly on, we don't have time to go through the details here, but if you look at how GCCs are really leveraging technology. Very interesting facts here. Almost 90% of GCCs are exploring innovation in technology and product engineering in some form or the other. Two-thirds of the global tech workforce in the world is based in India. One-third of the global engineering roles are based in India, right? AI and ML, of course, we don't need to say much about it. It's pretty evident. 185 GCCs. They are already employing close to more than 100,000 AI and machine learning engineers, and this number is growing rapidly. And the startup ecosystem which the country has, massive amounts of disruptions happening in the services space as well. So GCCs are partnering up with those. If I move on to nano GCCs, again, as I said, the very interesting trend. Um, these are small. I mean, I don't know. At least I had not heard of any of these companies. And they are superb companies, great companies. Some company in the semiconductor IP solution space, some in the edge AI accelerator space, some in the connected car solutions space, semiconductor IP, AI compute infrastructure. I mean, great companies, great IP that they have, and they would have set up these smaller operations in India. The government is playing a very, very key role to incentivize such GCCs. Karnataka is trying to have about 500 nano GCCs by 2029. Um, and these GCCs employ the high-end talent. Um this is a specialized talent, and that's the beauty of our country these days. You have probably the, the only PhD in solar panels. I'm completely making this up, but it's such niche areas where we have domain experts, where we have researchers, scientists, engineers. They're all here. And in most parts of the world, you might not no longer find such skills at these costs. And of course, the nano GCCs are also expanding into tier two and tier three. I want to again go into the details, but ER&D, that is the future. I won't be surprised if that 56% market share that we saw in the GCC pie that continuously goes up. and it will go up because of two reasons. One, this whole sector is exploding. Now you have the auto industry, you have the semiconductor industry, you have had obviously the software industry, and now with AI and products and innovation, electronics, you have the food companies like Nestle, you have Johnson and Johnson, you have retailers like Target, you have pharmaceutical companies like and medical devices companies like Roche. You of course have GE, telecom majors like Qualcomm. Everybody is setting up massive centers and scaling up these and doing really, really high-end work. Okay, so I think this is great from a macroeconomic impact point of view, great for the country and great for these corporations as well, because there is no other way that they can get this done. Final thing from my side, we are seeing a massive upward trend in terms of going up the value chain. ER&D, by the way, is just one example of that. Um, whether it's a specialization, you have an example of Pratt and Whitney here around new digital capabilities. The second point is, I had mentioned this earlier, very, very critical. Global functions are moving to India. So you could have a global function in inside a very large corporation being driven from India by a global CXO. And this number of CXOs is going to, from our estimates, going to go up from 6,500 to 30,000. Very interestingly, in one of my interviews with a friend, they said that, look, just like in manufacturing, nowadays people are talking about China plus one, where the plus one is India. Um, in the services industry, in the GCC industry, everybody is talking about the India plus one strategy. So India obviously will continue to scale and so on, but people are looking for other options also, and mostly this is happening in Eastern Europe and to some extent in Latin America as well. Then the final trend that we are seeing, where insourcing. So already there was a make and buy. So these GCCs were buying from external partners. So one has seen over the last 2, 3 years, especially massive trends for insourcing. And this is driven by a couple of things. Sometimes external partners might or might not necessarily be able to, understand the engagement and do it really well. But most importantly, because of hybrid working, the GCCs have massive infrastructures. So if you're a 4,000 people capacity GCC, you can actually scale up to 6,000 people because hybrid working is there. Okay, so very interesting areas. Obviously, I would love to talk more about this, but now I think the time has come for me to hand it over to Madhurima. Madhurima will basically talk about the GCC ecosystem. What are the needs? How does the company start thinking about whether to outsource or whether to offshore or not? If yes, then how? And then what are the issues? And then, of course, from our own perspective, we have done a lot of work in this sector over the last few years. So what has Benori's experience been here? Madhurima?
Thank you, Ashish. Great insight. Good evening, everyone. Now, kind of creating a segue from all the growth that we have talked about, and this segment seeing tremendous capacity build up, function build up, and value adding processes being coming into the segment over the next few years. How does the GCC ecosystem look like? And with the evolution, this system, this network, or this ecosystem has become more complex. Apart from the GCCs themselves and the parent companies driving these offshoring centers or the outsourcing engagements, there's a huge host of partner ecosystem that enables a very collaborative environment that supports operational excellence for them. And over the next few minutes, my thoughts would be, or my effort would be, talk a little bit about the different kind of problem statements, requirements, and questions each of these stakeholders are faced with. Coming to the first aspect of the key questions, When you look at the overall, the GCCs and their parent organizations, the key questions that emerge, and if I could request for the slide, yeah. So across their journey as they grow in their life cycle, right from the initiation point of a firm deciding whether or not they want to offshore or outsource, to the stage where they are a mature center, where they have expanded, they have brought in a lot of processes. There are different thoughts, different requirements that need to come through, and research, insights, data, all of these help getting a lot of informed decision making. When it comes to the first point of decisioning whether to offshore, there are several factors or levers around to understand. Whether it is going to gain you some competitive advantage. Is there going to be a cost or a talent arbitrage to come in? And more importantly, can this kind of a setup drive innovation for growth, and bring in some risk mitigation areas? Once decided, the journey is even more complex ahead. It starts by understanding a plethora of questions around what should be the strategy around offshoring, what different models to explore, what are the different functions and processes to look at, and above all, what are the external factors, macro factors like regulatory and policies to comply with, what are the different benchmarks that one needs to keep in mind and create processes around them. And once the GCCs are in play, the other pertinent question that keeps coming up over the time frame is how to scale, how to expand, how to grow further, what are the different areas to focus on, where to pivot. And the hows, of course, are much more detailed, starting from how to bring in the ethos and the culture from the parent firm into the GCCs. Now, this doesn't only limit itself to looking at what kind of talent, workforce, or training programs would you have, but what would be the right kind of locations to look at? What are the different skill sets and aspirations of the people you have? And above all, the enabling ecosystem of partners. How should these be selected? Who are the ones that will bring real value added insights and leverage and support to make the growth possible? Of course, from the perspective of the partners in the ecosystem, there are several different kind of questions that they look at. Since they are serving this segment as a customer, they would want to understand and assess at all times that which are the key markets being countries themselves, the sectors, where should they focus on, what kind of questions their prospective customers have, what are the processes that are most often offshored and why, and what should be built around them. And above all, who should be the right people they should be talking to. What also goes on in parallel is a lot of understanding of the market itself. And this is not a one-time question. This is an ongoing kind of a process where one needs to keep identifying the different kind of trends, the growth that is happening, the new GCCs that are being coming up, what kind of niches or niche capabilities are being set up, what tech capabilities are these GCCs requiring? Do they have these capabilities? Do they want to build it in-house? Are they looking at a partner? Of course, AI and automation cannot be undermined here. This is a great lever for GCCs to bring in the cost and sustainable cost advantages. So partners are primarily supporting a lot of these activities, and in their journeys, they need to keep a tab on the market, on their customer segments, right from the parent firms to the GCCs operating in India and elsewhere, to understand some of these questions. Now, these may seem a lot of questions. Of course, it is a minefield of issues. And as growth continues, they will continue to grow and change in nature. However, this is also a gold mine of creating opportunities. And we at Benori, over the last 6 years or so, have been partnering up with this entire ecosystem in different formats to solve for some of these questions and in turn add value for them. Some of the areas that we would like to highlight today, or rather, talk about to you in terms of how our success stories have been, are across all of these questions. Just to put an example, once when a parent firm is looking at entering or setting up a GCC? There are several different kind of questions. These may pan across assessment areas where one can be actually looking at what are the different opportunities for outsourcing or offshoring. What capabilities would they find here? Would they have the right kind of talent to hire and train and deliver? Or how is the ecosystem or the role between the GCCs as well as their other providers going to mature and give value? Once some of these feasibility level questions are understood, there can also be a lot of setup or very specific execution related questions that we can answer. A very interesting study we did was around helping set up a center of excellence in the EPC space, where we were helping to benchmark all similar center of excellences and try and understand, based on data and insights developed through those data sets, that how have these formed, what their journey has been, what kind of value add they have brought to their parent firms. And in the end, we were able to carve out a very good story for our client to understand where and what capabilities do they need to bring in once they are setting up the COE. Of course, there could be other questions, especially around, once one is navigating the journey towards bringing sustainable cost advantages, is where to move next. What are the next set of cities to look at? And again, a very interesting study that we did was to look at the next set of cities that will form the base of the IT BPM industry. And this was based on several levers that we evaluated, assessed, and talked to several different, I would say, stakeholders in the ecosystem to understand this. This was spread across skills. We spoke to academia as well as the population that is going to, kind of become the workforce, infrastructure players, looking at the cost of living factors in these cities. And in the end, we were able to come up with a very comprehensive insight around how to stack up and decide that which city maps really well in terms of the next locations that one needs to look at. That's all about, a lot of questions that during the setup transition phase one might have. Once the GCCs are in play, the questions differ a lot. They are more looking at a lot of areas where how they can scale up. Again, a very interesting example of that is in the actuarial and the broker services segment in the health insurance space. We were recently working with a client where we were trying to help them understand not only how the space is growing, but also what are the different offerings their peers have in this segment. What kind of problems have they solved for? Is there a best practice that they can really adopt or understand and bring in? What are those white spaces which are still left untouched and which could actually be served from the Indian GCC here? Again, another question that crops up a lot amongst the GCCs is how to create that alignment between, the parent company as well as the GCCs themselves. I would say that at different points of time, they would like to conduct a review of the success of what was envisioned in terms of the value and the efficiency to be brought in through these segments. And we help in such studies as well. Of course, benchmarking, competitive intelligence, understanding the lay of the land is again a very important area that we focus on. And we've done several interesting studies on those areas, whether it is, looking at carving out the organizational structure of certain kind of sector of GCCs, or looking at benchmarking what kind of very specific tech adoption strategies a particular GCC has taken and how that can be adopted within the client organization to see how they can bring in some of those changes. When it comes to the partners, I think our solutions and the way we have worked with them is more towards helping them understand what the industry needs, where is it moving, how should they create their plans around, and solutions around, value propositions around pitching to them. One important factor that revolves around all the different kind of solutions that not only Benori brings, but many other providers, is tracking this space. Now, this could be around, looking at outsourcing deals, the rates, the pricing, contracts, how that entire ecosystem is changing, or simply looking at, how the leaders of these GCCs are thinking about the evolution over the next 3 to 5 years, or what kind of spending are they thinking of? Now, whichever lens you look at from, tracking studies or understanding the developments in this space really help a lot in formulating strategies for the next 3 to 5 years. With this, of course, these are all solutions which are customized and completely bespoke, and we can, work with our clients and partners around figuring out the right way to solve some of these. However, in our, journey so far, we were often kind of faced with some questions around just understanding the lay of the land. What is the stock universe we are talking about? Is there a comprehensive set of information that one can start as the fundamental level to understand the industry? So today, I think, along with the launch of our knowledge series, we are also formally launching our, I would say, GCC database. Now, this database is a comprehensive, I would say, compendium of all the GCCs in India. We cover almost 1,700 GCCs, unique companies across different sectors, right from, BFSI to IT to energy, automotive, CPG and retail, telecommunications, all of these. And what it helps you to get a very quick understanding of how these are structured across the parent companies they are coming from, the markets they are coming from, the size and scale of these GCCs, how they are spread across the country, what are the different cities in which these have centers, who are the key executives, what is the kind of workforce intelligence we can talk about. So what it helps is this database is to give you a starting point to start your to build your thoughts, or to give you a initial understanding of how this industry is structured. Focus on, let's say you are a telecom player and you're wanting to see who are the peers who have already established some kind of systems. So with that, I would like to, stop here and would request you to share your questions. And for any other thoughts, questions that you have around, our solutions, please write to us on info@benorinknowledge.com, and we'll be happy to take it up in a discussion format with you. Thank you all, and thanks for listening in.
Thank you, Madhurima. That was really good. A lot of great, interesting insights out there. Now, the last 5-10 minutes, maybe we can try and there are a lot of questions which have come up. So let me just scroll through this. Thank you, Raghav. Thank you, Nishag and Anand. And of course, Maninder and Tammy, absolutely, the ratio should be 50%. And I would urge you and your organizations to see how you can help in increasing that number from 17% to 50%. Wage inflation, fortunately in India, just the sheer size of our talent pool, in my earlier avatar, our entry level salaries, if they were X, and this I'm talking about 10, 12, 15 years back, even in today's time, and that X might have become 1.2X and nothing more than that. So fortunately, I don't think the wage inflation is going to be that high, and I do think that the dollar will keep on appreciating against the rupee. So any kind of wage inflation will, to a large extent, not completely get offset by that. Gautam, lambda is just a mathematical symbol. Lambda, it's just a formula. Productivity in India divided by productivity in the West. Okay, so it's not an acronym. Soumya, I don't have an answer to your question at this stage. E in ER&D stands for engineering. So this is engineering R&D. And then Rohit, you can interact with Madhurima offline. We can tell you all about the database. In fact, some of our clients are now subscribing to this and buying some of this data already. All right. Now let me move on to the questions, and there were some very interesting questions out there. So Gautam, your question is our views on churn attrition that characterizes a segment in India, and unlike the recent muted trend. See, fortunately, I think what one has seen is that, um, and especially for multinational companies who are operating in India and for their GCCs, normally one is seeing that the churn has always been lower than third-party providers, like the partners that Madhurima had mentioned. And there were several reasons for that, but some of the reasons was obviously linked to the pay scales and the salary levels, which are always tend to be somewhat higher. And also, given the labor market dynamic in India over the last 10 years, and I had mentioned some of those points, I think the sheer capacity which is coming into the market, the labor supply which is there, um, that has sort of helped in the demand supply equation. Okay. Having said that, churn and attrition is a fact of life, and I'm sure you have dealt with it quite a bit over your career. Um, um, my sense is that the entire industry in India has reached a level of maturity. Things have come down in terms of attrition. It is a more sane environment, and we can talk more about that offline. Madhurima, you want to answer Nisarg's question around what has
Yes,
been a typical GCC establishment journey like at what, and the question that
yes,
he
sure.
Nisarg has put out there.
Sure, Nizar. So, Nizar, I would say that based on what we have seen through our different research initiatives and understanding this industry over the last few years, um, this is not a set rule. Mostly, yes, your question is, very pertinent here that they come in a little while after the GCC has been established because as they uh, kind of gauge through the needs they have around IT, that's when they start looking at technology vendors, IT providers to come in. However, in some cases, especially a lot of specialized units that are getting set up, which are more focused on delivery based on technology, this can start at the inception of the GCCs as well. And also to your second question around the traditional IT segment getting impacted, there is a lot of documentation and insights around it coming in to say that there is definitely some impact because GCCs now are creating large internal technology teams. However, based on what I have understood or we have read through, is that this impact is not going to be a huge impact because there will be technology is an area where traditional IT teams will keep on building capabilities and skills. And by the time the GCCs will start evaluating some of these new skills, the IT players might already have that. So the collaboration between the two will perhaps continue to be. In short term, definitely some revenue loss, and some of the industry reports state that this is going to be a loss of 5 to 10%, but this is not a long term kind of a phenomena that is going to be there.
Yeah. There was another interesting question here from Raj. Who are the typical sponsors of a GCC? Is it the CFO or the CIO's office at an overall level? Raj, actually, given the strategic nature and the competitive advantage that competition is deriving these days, GCCs have actually become a board level issue. And ultimately, it's the CEO and the board who would be the typical sponsors. Obviously, the implementation might happen via the CFO's office or the CIO's office. But for example, we have been working with some of the consulting firms in India who want to operate at the GCC in the India-US corridor. So a client actually got us to create a pitch for a very large corporation in the US, which was our client's client, for a board level pitch. Why should that company consider setting up a massive GCC in India? And by not doing it, how are they putting the company on the line, actually? So I hope that answers your question. Um, Madhurima, Pavan has a question around sharing some insights on operating models of global tech development hubs. Maybe one could talk about, maybe you could answer that question from a make versus buy, insourcing, and all of those aspects.
Yeah, sure, Ashish. Uh, Pawan, there are different models, and of course, we can definitely, talk more about it. But at a broader level, the first option is always looking at the make versus buy questions. Whether you are going to, have in a team, a GCC or a offshoring unit that will create where you will create these capabilities, or you can start with outsourcing this to a third party provider that already has these capabilities, and then kind of there can be a BOT model, there can be different models that can be there when you are kind of looking at outsourcing. Again, this depends on the criticality of the function needed to be outsourced, and of course, the kind of niche aspect of the functions that are needed.
Yeah, so we are actually out of time, but maybe just one final question. And um, yeah,
I
so
think, Ashish, we can answer something like, can the impact of GCCs be looked at industry level or for a peer? I
yeah.
think, it can be both. It doesn't necessarily to be only looked compared to be with the peers. One can look at industry benchmarks as well. And again, overall GCC as a segment as well. So there can be different levers to gauging the performance and the success of the GCC and the value it is creating for the parent company.
Yeah, just one final point here on this one. I think in today's world, and especially where India is as a as the hub of global services, any company of any scale who does not have an India presence is not having that presence at their own risk. So it is not a whether I should be doing this, it's what I should be doing about this. All right. Unfortunately, we are out of time completely. This was a fascinating discussion and a very strategic one. Thank you so much for joining in, and we look forward to interacting with you in the future as well in the next series of our knowledge series. As you start exiting, a feedback form will pop up. Please do fill that out. It will really help us in becoming better. And again, thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.